Hello and welcome to another Succeed with Dyslexia video. We are interviewing some incredible guests over the month of May, and we're trying to find the connection between dyslexia and mental health. And within that, we're allowed to ask these fantastic questions and meet some incredible people. And today, without a shadow of a doubt, we have two incredible guests who are going to be telling us around dyslexia and obviously living with dyslexia and the incredible work they're doing. So I would love to for you to introduce yourselves, and thank you so much to the both of you for taking your time out of your busy schedules today to speak with us. Thank you so much. Would you like to introduce yourself, Don?
Yes, thank you, Darren. My name is Don Winn, and I'm an award-winning author and dyslexia advocate, and I'm also a publisher. And I've been working in dyslexia advocacy for over 10 years now. Especially once I started to understand my own dyslexia, then the light bulb came on.
And I'm Elizabeth Winn, and my background is in biochemistry and psychology. And even with that training, I was still so woefully undereducated about dyslexia that we have had the most wonderful journey together, discovering what works after many years of discovering what doesn't work.
Absolutely fantastic. And I'd love to kind of deep dive into so many different things, so many questions. And you're absolutely right with regards to Elizabeth, with the learning around kind of dyslexia. I remember when I was diagnosed at the age of 36, it was obviously a late diagnosis, but just because that diagnosis was there, I still feel I'm on a continuous journey of learning how dyslexia fits with myself. And I'm just always continuously, reaching out and learning new things. I always say I'm like a sponge, just absorbing, trying to find some information around that.
Absolutely.
So, Dom, so with regards to so obviously you're you mentioned before that you're a couple, and obviously one of the things that we get mentioned quite a lot within Succeed is around if one of the partners is dyslexic and one's not, how that kind of transpires in that kind of support network and understanding around that. Could you elaborate a little bit on the incredible work that you're doing? Yes. And the understanding around that?
Yes, well, we've been married. We're going on 41 years now.
Congratulations.
But our early marriage got off to a pretty rough start. We came from polar opposites when it came to our early educational background. And I'll let her describe her early educational background. Mine was very troubled. When I started first grade, I wasn't able to learn to read. I had a lot of the sibling conditions that go along with dyslexia: dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and some dyspraxia. And so I struggled throughout my first year in the first grade. And it was so bad. I was having anxiety, other health problems, and the decision was to lead me back a second year. So I spent 2 years in the first grade. The second year, thinking, well, that will fix it, but there was the same learning environment. So I continued to struggle until a special ed teacher recognized my symptoms from an extension course she was taking, that it was dyslexia. And she started working with me one-on-one to help me learn to read, and at least got me to the second grade. But what no one ever understood is all these sibling conditions that also affected my early education. And so I continued to struggle throughout all of my early educational years. But I had the label of dyslexia. It was never explained to me. And so I didn't know any more about it than Elizabeth did. And I'll let her explain her early educational background in a moment. But when we did meet, we hit it off together. Despite our polar opposite educational differences from our early childhood, there were still so many commonalities and things that drew us together. But once we got married, then that's when the differences really started to show themselves and when problems ensue. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth now, and she can explain hers.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, it couldn't have been a more different story. I came from a stable family background rather than a turbulent one. I'm the oldest of two girls, and our home was always filled with books, and more books, and classical music. And I was already, self-avowed geek here. I was already reading the encyclopedia and the dictionary before I started public school. I have a thirst for knowledge, and I just love to read and to learn. And so when I began school, I was bored and disgruntled because all they were doing was coloring, and I wanted to read. And so the school system tested me, and they stopped testing at an 8th grade reading level. And they said, okay, we're going to move her up. But we're not going to move her up too much because the social skills aren't there, because I was just, a first grader.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was in public school, it was lots of extra reading and teaching the algebra class for the teacher kind of a thing while she sat in the back of the room. So there were just all sorts of exciting educational things, attached to that thirst for knowledge and that love for reading and understanding, really a quest to understand things. And so when I met Don, what intrigued me the most about him was he had these amazing ideas. I loved the way his mind worked because he is an idea person. And we would have these tremendous conversations, and, it lit up my brain, and his brain was lit up. And, we had a short courtship and got married. And then the differences began to become apparent. And I did all the wrong things. I could not have made more of a mess of it because I assumed that the things that I was seeing in terms of not registering what I was saying, for example, not hearing me, or me telling him something and then him denying that he had ever heard it later on, I attributed those things to some sort of a character issue. It's like, well, maybe he doesn't love me. Maybe I don't have a voice in this relationship. In psychology, that's called meaning making. Okay. So our brain is constantly trying to understand what something means. He looked at me funny. What does that mean? They stopped talking when I walked over to them in the party. What does that mean? And so when I would tell Don something and we would plan on having company, and then the day we were going to have the guests, he would say, what's all this commotion? And I'd say, well, we talked about it. The so-and-sos are coming over. And he said, no, we didn't talk about that. And so I assumed that meant that he was withdrawing or wasn't as vested in the relationship as I was. And nothing could have been farther from the truth. But until I learned about the bandwidth with dyslexia, that, Don always says that he has a dial-up brain in a high-speed world. And we talk a lot in our venues and, educational opportunities about the fact that when the internet was new and someone sent you a vacation picture, an hour later, the top inch of the picture was all that was showing, and you had to wait sometimes all afternoon to be able to see someone's, beautiful shot of their memory of their vacation. And, the picture was already there. It was in the buffer, but it had to be decoded. And so now what I've learned is that if Don's buffer is full, that's not the time to talk to him.
Wow.
And I always reminded her, please make sure you have my attention before you say something. Because sometimes she will say something and I'm not registering it right away. And so it took a little while. And the thing was, she didn't understand or know anything about dyslexia. I didn't understand myself either. It wasn't until I was close to 40 that I started learning about myself and the dyslexia and so forth. And the journey that we were on together was very turbulent early on. But when Elizabeth started looking at our situation out of curiosity, and she wanted to help, she wanted a solution to it, and that's when she started doing her own investigation. and her light bulb came on too. And so I'll let her explain a little bit about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll pass that back on to Elizabeth. She's doing a great job, by the way.
This is so relatable, and I'm just intrigued to learn more. So please, Elizabeth, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. The study of biochemistry taught me that there are so many reasons for things that we might think mean something else. So in Don's case, all of the stress and, the other thing that I noticed was that he had this brilliant mind, but the pressure at work kept him from being as ambitious as I thought he could be, considering how brilliant he was. So, I thought that meant something too. But, the thing about the study of biochemistry, as I struggled to understand why he was so stressed out and what I could do to help instead of just being critical, which is how I started out, the study of biochemistry taught me that in behavior, there's chemistry and there's character. And when behaviors are unwanted, it's rarely a character problem. It's usually something that is a challenge in someone's chemistry. Poor methylation really changes someone's chemistry. Having any kind of a structural sensory processing disorder like dyslexia really changes someone's behaviors and how much stress they can manage. And yeah, that was the real light bulb for me, was when I recognized that being critical and nagging was not helping the situation. It was only making both of us more miserable. And so, yeah, the light bulb moment was, what if I learned how to be a better helper? And that's what led me down the biochemistry path and the genetics path and the psychology path. And eventually we tumbled to the fact that understanding as much as we could about dyslexia and what that meant, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, all of the things that Don suffers with, was going to ultimately allow us to be a team instead of being at odds with one another.
Absolutely. And you touched on the point, so in the way that when we think of dyslexia, we ultimately think of it as just reading and writing. That's kind of the first instinct, but it goes so much deeper into this. And then we start looking at other neurodiversities, as in, ADHD, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and these different types of the traits that that formulate around dyslexia. Because we could turn around and say, yeah, I'm been diagnosed with dyslexia, but as we know, there's I'm dyslexic and have ADHD, and I'm pretty sure there's other elements within that as well. And it's just trying to understand yourself, isn't it, to how to best deal with your own kind of self, and then how others can kind of help and support, but then how you can then work around those. So it's a juggling act on so many counts. Would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And when we several years back, we were invited by the Ross and Saunders School here that is strictly for dyslexic children to view a private screening of the big picture, Rethinking Dyslexia. And we both were captivated by it because I kept saying, that's me, that's me. And I started learning more about myself, and we were both in tears. I was in tears because I started understanding myself, and Elizabeth was in tears because she started seeing why I'm the way I am, and also started feeling badly about how she was early on in our marriage. And so
absolutely,
it was an eye-opening experience, and that's when our journey to really understand dyslexia and our dyslexia advocacy, because we're both working in that together now from two different vantage points. That's when it really started to take off.
Absolutely, and from a when we take dyslexia and we talk about dyslexia in schools, and then we talk about dyslexia in workplace, it's not normally spoken about massively within relationships unless you've experienced it yourself, I understand that some people think, well, actually they've just that my partner has dyslexia, and that's kind of that's as far as it kind of goes, and there's different ways of dealing with this. But it's incredible the amount of work that you've done to research to fully understand how to support each other within this, because it's a two-way thing, isn't it? I know that although I need support within my kind of dyslexia, I know that there's a certain parts that I would need to give support back within this. And it's just understanding. It's understanding that, and that can be very, very tricky if you don't speak about it or look into it or speak to your partner. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. And what's been amazing in this journey together, as we both began to fully understand dyslexia, its sibling conditions, and all its ramifications, is that we recognize how we truly complement each other now. Because I have strengths that she doesn't.
You do.
And she has lots of strengths that I don't. And when we actually work together and recognize there's things that I can't do that she can, and vice versa, and we don't expect each other to have these same strengths, we complement each other. And we together, as we were talking about earlier today, we are our formidable force. Because when two minds come together unitedly, a lot more can be accomplished.
Yeah, it's really about the love and the respect and meeting each other where we are, rather than saying, well, why don't you tick off all these boxes over here? It's not about perfection. It's about showing up for one another and unconditional love. And again, that respect for the strengths that may have taken us both some time to perceive, because sometimes we're not early bloomers. Sometimes we bloom a little bit later in life, but the point is you bloom and enjoy the beauty of that experience together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what would you say with regards to, because it's inspirational that what you both have done and working towards the understanding of each other, and if we were from a couple's point of view that probably didn't go down the kind of the research and all the other this side, what kind of things would you suggest? Because you mentioned at the very early stages of the relationship there was a few things that were quite difficult, and it was the understanding of whether Don doesn't care about that, or he's forgetting this, or some, all these different things. What would you say those kind of early stages were, if someone was kind of going through that, what they can do, and we understand this isn't a quick fix or anything, but just these small little incremental steps that people can kind of put in place.
Well, I'll go ahead and start out. I think that the number one thing is, if dyslexia is involved in either party, is to learn everything you can about it, and all the when you look at behaviors, to say, okay, how is dyslexia involved in that? And also, when you begin to understand that, you can't just, flip a switch and say, okay, now we know that you have this problem, let's fix it. Because there are some things about dyslexia that cannot be fixed. It's just, you just have to work around, or you just process things differently. And you have to recognize that. You look at the individual strengths, and you really leverage those strengths. And as far as the weaknesses, that's where the other party can help with those weaknesses. And that's where the complementing each other comes in.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And my best invitation to couples that are discovering these challenges in their relationship is to keep an open mind about the significance and the import, the meaning of what the troubling or challenging behaviors are. Don't automatically assume that the relationship is over, or that love isn't there, or that respect isn't there, or that it's a hopeless situation, because it's not. If you truly have that depth of love that drew you together in the first place, there's nothing that you can't overcome. And like Don was saying, there's a certain level of acceptance that's required once you learn about the way the brain works differently. Neurodiversity is neurodiversity, and that means having an expectation of someone's brain being exactly like yours is going to lead to disappointment, but only 100% of the time. So when you understand that the other person's brain works differently, that doesn't mean it's broken. That doesn't mean that his brain or her brain is not as good as yours. It just means it's different. And that out of love and respect, this is your opportunity to accommodate one another and accept the reality of what is and work with that. And you can build beautiful things in a neurodiverse relationship. Actually, we have one of the best marriages that I know of, and I work with lots of couples. So, there you have it. What you start out with and what you end up with can be two very different things, but it depends on what you believe and how hard you're willing to work.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Elizabeth. With regards to kind of when people talk about kind of coping mechanisms, or certain things that kind of help with regards to some of the stresses and the anxiety that comes with. So I know that if my dyslexia actually worsens when I'm at a height of, say, stress or anxious, or I'm incredibly busy and got a very full-on day. So for me, the visual stress of something, the words moving around on the screen doesn't happen all the time, but it literally just happens. It happens as in when, my stress picks up. Are there, so I know for a fact that I kind of, before I would try and fight it and try and write that email, and it would take me 25 minutes to do it. Now I sort of shut the laptop down, and then I'm off, go for a walk, or I meditate, or I do something, and then I come back to it. Have you found that there are any kind of coping mechanisms or strategies that you've witnessed or done yourselves?
Well, I can certainly relate to the email. There are times where the words flow, and I do okay with the spelling, although I still love spell check. And there are other days where I just can't put two sentences together, and even simple words, I can't spell them. And so instead of just sitting there getting more and more frustrated, that's where you just have to say, okay, this is not the time my brain wants to work on this. Do other things, as you mentioned, take a walk, do some physical activities, clean, vacuum the house, whatever it is. And then another time I can sit down and says, okay, now it's coming together. And sometimes the best time for me to have any creative outlet is in the middle of the night when I wake up. And there's some brain science behind that. Is generally right when you wake up is when your brain is the most creative. And with me, it happens in the middle of the night, unfortunately. And so sometimes I get up and I start typing while the words are there. And if I don't do that and I don't go back to sleep a little later on, it's like, now what was that idea I had? I can't remember it. And so you have to be patient with yourself and recognize there are times things flow and there are times things don't flow. And that's okay. Just do things as you're able to do them.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. If people wanted to kind of get in touch with the incredible work they do, I know you've written an incredible blog as well. How do people get in touch with yourselves?
Oh yeah, I have a website. It's very easy to spell. It's DonWinn, DonWinn.com. And that's where you can get information and links to all my books, including the award-winning book, Raising a Child with Dyslexia, what every parent needs to know, and a great chapter book series that's perfect for reluctant readers, the Cirque the Boy Night series. It has won multiple awards. All that's available on my website, and there's lots of picture books as well. And also, I'd love to hear from individuals. My email address is don.winn.com. My dad always called it a bootlegger's name because it's easy to remember. So yeah, Dunwin, I love to hear from people. And so you can visit the blog, you can follow it. There's I have on the blog, I have dyslexia article links to all the articles and blogs I've written on dyslexia, including one that Elizabeth and I did together on living with adult with dyslexia. That's available on there. And so, yeah, I welcome input from everybody.
Well, it's been absolutely incredible listening to you, but I could continue this conversation for hours. For me, like I said, every time I meet someone or I learn, I'm literally like a sponge. I like to learn things new, and you've both, definitely inspired me and given me so much more knowledge on my own personal dyslexia. So I cannot thank you both enough for your time today. We will continue to share, obviously, your links out so people can get hold of the incredible work that you're both doing. But I cannot thank you enough for your time today.
Well, thank you, Darren. It's been a pleasure visiting with you.
Yes, it has. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for the work that you're doing to make the world a better place for other dyslexics.
Bless you both. Thank you so much. That's it from this interview. If you've been touched by this story, or affected by the story in any way, shape, or form, or need any support, then we will obviously throw out our month of May with our dyslexia awareness, mental health awareness campaign. We will be obviously having lots of details, so please do check all the links and check out our websites as well. Don, Elizabeth, thank you so much again for taking time out of your day, and we hope you have a brilliant rest of the day and a fantastic weekend. And we will speak to you very, very soon. Take care.
Thank you, Darren.
Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this interview. Throughout the month of May, we've had the opportunity to interview some incredible guests specifically about mental health and the relationship between that and dyslexia. Please feel free to click this link here and learn more from Dr. Neil Pass and his experience with his own dyslexia and mental health. We'll see you there.